Boom, let's do it. Dang it, I was wrong about the Hitler revival thing, but I'm man enough to admit it. All right, guys, let's get into this. Here we go. This one's going to be a little bit painful for me. I'm sorry, because not only was I wrong, I can handle that. I'm good being wrong sometimes. No sweat. It is part of the human experience. And, when you're tight with Jesus, you get used to other people being right than you because we typically don't naturally, in our flesh, agree with Christ. So being wrong doesn't bother me. It's the fact that I was wrong about this because that means that there's a reality happening that I really didn't want to have happen. So we got to deal with it. But first, I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff today. So if you got questions about it, you can text in your questions to 509-867-0070. Let's do this. Proverbs 8, chapter 8, verses 22 to 36. A long one today, but it's all kind of one unit. Here goes. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago, I was set up at the first before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth, and when there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, and when he assigned to the sea its limits, so that the water might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him, like a master workman. I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world and delighting in the children of men. And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise. Do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting before my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death. All right, beautiful poetry, right? It's beautiful in Hebrew, it's beautiful in English, it's just beautiful poetry, and the point is simple. God has never done anything without being perfectly wise. All of his works are wise, all of his works are good, and it's that simple. God is wise, always has been, no exceptions, ever. All right, now this passage is often seen as a place where Christ is like making an appearance in the Old Testament. It's like, Jesus is the Proverbs 8 wisdom. I'm going to say, not so fast. I mean, on one hand, Jesus is the fulfillment of it, which shouldn't surprise us because, we know that the entire Hebrew Bible points directly to Christ, right? Like on the road to Emmaus after his resurrection, before people know that he's the risen Christ, he's explaining to these guys, look, all of the law and the prophets point to me. All of the Hebrew Bible points to me. So we are looking for Christ in all of these areas. I want to stop short, though, of saying that this is a prophecy of Jesus, because it's not prophecy, it's poetry. And I want to read it as poetry. So obviously we can understand that Christ is all over this thing and all over the Hebrew Bible, what we would call the Old Testament or the First Testament. But instead, I think this is a poetic description of God and one of God's attributes, meaning his perfect wisdom. And Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of this characteristic in God. So it's like the Bible is the Word of God, and Jesus is the living Word of God, but Jesus is not the Bible. They're not the same thing. Instead, the Bible is the Word of God. It is God's communication to us, and everything that tells us about God is embodied in Jesus. So he's not the Bible, but he's the ultimate fulfillment, the point of the Bible. Everything in the Bible points up to him. Everything in the written Word of God points to the living Word of God. And I would call this a poetic description of the wisdom of God, not the living wisdom of God. Although there is this passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, and it says it twice. It says it in verse 24, where it says, "But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God." So it calls Jesus the wisdom of God, meaning everything about God that has always been wise it culminates in him. He's like embodied walking around wisdom. It says it again in verse 30, "And because of him you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification and redemption." So Jesus became wisdom from God to us. In other words, people have been chasing wisdom for centuries, for millennia, trying to run after God, and then Jesus showed up and said, "You found me," right? So not all descriptions of wisdom in the Bible are discussing Jesus, but all of them are embodied in Jesus. So we can take poetry as poetry and not as prophecy, but just as we know that this this is a poetic description, we can also say, yeah, and nobody has ever been described this way except God, and no human has ever been described this way except Jesus, because he's God in the flesh. But the point, back to the main point of it, very clear. Before anybody knew anything about Jesus, before anybody knew anything about what God was going to do to send his son in human flesh and live our life for us, the Hebrews of old, the Old Testament Jews and all this, when they were reading this, what they were understanding is what we should still be understanding today, that everything that God does is wise and well measured and appropriate and good. God has never done anything without perfect, total, complete, abounding, infinite, overflowing wisdom. So if we want to do wise things, we will do what God says to do, because everything that he says and prescribes and does is wise. So if we want to be wise, we'll do what God says. If we want to know the God who is wise, we will get to know Jesus, who is the living embodiment of the wisdom of God. Now, with that, let's take a look at these people who have been serving Christ for 2,000 years. I'll give you guys a little bit of reading from church history. Going to hit you again today with the Didache. Let's put this bad boy on this camera over here, the Didache, all right? Now, this, again, I introduced this like a month ago. I don't expect you guys to remember that. I talk fast and I throw a lot at you. So the Didache, it's a Greek word. It just means the teaching, and this is one of the earliest Christian documents we have. It's like this and the Apostles' Creed, right? After the New Testament was done, this is pretty much what we got. And so nobody knows who wrote it, but it was designed as a manual for Christian living. So it's got stuff in here about personal character, like we're going to read today. It's got stuff in here about worship practices, how to treat people that claim that they are authoritative preachers or prophets, and it gives us instruction for all this stuff. So it's designed to be memorized. You can hear this kind of sing-songy rhythm to it, because we're supposed to be teaching these types of things to our kids. And so Christian catechism started in the earliest days, and not just for kids, but for new believers. And the Didache is our earliest example of that outside of the New Testament. I'm going to read you chapter 3. It is 10 verses long. They broke it up into chapters and verses like we did for the Bible, just to make it easy to reference. So it says this, Didache chapter 3. My child, flee from every evil thing and from every, where did you go? And from every form of it. Do not be prone to anger, for anger leads to murder. Do not be jealous or quarrelsome or of a hot temper, for these things spawn murder. My child, do not be sexually lustful, or lust for lust leads to sexual immorality. Have neither a filthy mind nor a dirty mouth, nor have a wandering eye, for these give birth to adultery. My child, do not be a diviner of omens, since it leads to idolatry. Do not be an enchanter or an astrologer or a magician, or even be willing to entertain these things, for all these things breed idolatry. Okay, right there, by the way, don't even be willing to entertain these things. If somebody wants to start talking to you about horoscopes, that's astrology, right? Don't roll with them. I had somebody at a store once. It was like, I was just talking to them. Oh, when were you born? I was like, oh, I was born in. They're like, oh, you're a Capricorn or a Libra, whatever I was. I don't know. I was like, yeah, I don't know about all of that, but I'm a Christian. So when Jesus rose from the dead, I think he claimed authority over all of that. And they looked at me like, what? And I'm like, yeah, listen, I'm a total Jesus freak. And since you told me about your religion, now you got to hear about mine. You got 3 minutes. I'm going to lay the gospel out for you. And they laughed because they thought I was joking. And then I shared the gospel with them for 3 minutes. Don't talk horoscopes with people. It's not that you can't engage the subject. It's that, you don't want to get into that. It's not harmless writings in a magazine. This stuff is, it's demonic. It's evil. Verse 5. My child, do not be a liar, since lies are related to theft. Do not be a lover of money or seek to be the center of attention, for these are motivation for theft. My child, do not be a murmurer, since it puts you on the road to blasphemy. Do not be a rebellious or lawless, because these are only a step away from blasphemy. Rather, be humble, since the humble shall inherit the earth. Be patient and merciful and transparent and gentle and good. And always be carefully respectful of the words which you have heard. You shall not brag about yourself, nor be overconfident in your thoughts. You shall not keep company with the self-important. Instead, make connections with the just and the common. Accept whatever happens to you as good, knowing that apart from God, nothing comes to pass. That's good stuff, man. I love the Didache. That's just good for the soul. Every now and then I'll just sit and read it. It's short. I don't even know how many chapters it is. It's like 8 or something. I forget. Let me see. Oh, I was way off. 16. Okay, double. So yeah, the Didache is 16 chapters. I just read you all of chapter 3. It's a short read, and it's worth it. There's some stuff in there that's, how do we say, not normal for us today. It's like, wait, what? You want us to you want us to baptize people? Like how? Like it's got to be running water. You have to get them in running water. So find a stream or something like that. So, there's some stuff in there that's like, okay, I don't know that helps me out a whole lot right now, but cool. You can see how they lived back then and how they were talking amongst each other as Christianity spread rapidly. So with that, then I vote we get into some thises and that's. Again, guys, if you got questions on this, the best place to do to send them in to get an immediate response is going to be the text line at 509-867-0070, and one of our producers will pick that up and send them on in, and I'll get to them quickly. You can also hit us up at Hungry for Wisdom on X. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, all of the social medias. Give us a like and a subscribe. Give us a follow and a share and a 5-star rating and whatever else. The best thing you could do to help out the channel is to comment. Leave a comment and engage, and that just shows basically like this is something that people want to engage in. So we'll send it out to more people. It's like a free way of getting Bible teaching and discipleship materials out to people. Costs nothing, takes no time. Bada bang. Okay, we got 3 questions for today. Number 1. Oh, this one was mine. Sorry. Yeah, I wrote, apparently I was wrong about the Hitler thing. There is a movement of young neo-Nazis. Great. Okay. If you weren't listening on a previous episode, then what I said was, the question came in like, hey, there's all these people on social media talking about, a resurgence of Hitler worship and things like that. Is that true? And I was like, maybe, but I doubt it because there's, all these algorithms and bots, and anytime social media starts to take a turn towards being a good communication tool for people on the political right, then it gets attacked with bots just saying awful things so that they can invalidate the entire platform. So I said, I'm guessing that's probably what happened, is this whole thing just got hit with, with a bunch of fake accounts and stuff, and it looks like there's a bunch of neo-Nazis running around. And I know that some guys are owning the title proudly, or the title of white supremacist, at least. They're owning that proudly, and they're, they're sending out all kinds of stuff like in their own name and whatnot. So those guys exist, but there's always going to be a few of them, right? As far as like in mass, I was thinking probably not the case that there's a big resurgence of this stuff. Apparently, though, I was wrong, because one of our dear listeners sent me a thing and was like, hey, by the way, here's where these conversations are happening, and these are real people having them, and it's kind of legit, and it's catching some traction. So I say to myself, well, crap, because now as Christians, we have to spend a whole lot of time specifying that white nationalism is not compatible with the Christian cause. To tell you the truth, guys, I don't even know if there are any white people in the Bible. There might be. I'm sure there probably were. I mean, Paul's doing work in Greece, and I mean, Europeans are generally white, so I would assume those guys are pretty light-skinned, but they're also Mediterranean. So, I mean, who knows? It's possible that Jesus went through his entire life without meeting a white person. I find it doubtful because he was in commercial centers in the Decapolis and things like that, and there were people from all over the place. So I'm sure there were, gringos like running around, but my point is, there is no way that Christianity can be considered a white man's religion. So if anybody is a white supremacist and claiming to be a Christian, then they've got 2 tracks of thought that are conflicting with each other, and the most loving thing we could possibly do is help them find that point of conflict soon so that it doesn't turn into an existential crisis for them later, and they question everything that they think they know about themselves and God, because that's the kind of thing that leads people to suicide. C.S. Lewis, Francis Schaeffer. He said the one of the most loving things you can do for people is to deconstruct their worldview for them, because then you can rebuild it with wisdom from Christ. But it's dangerous. You gotta tread carefully there, because it does lead people to absolute despair sometimes. So, all right, what's the Christian take on white supremacy? And I know some of these guys are calling themselves Christians. I really wish they'd knock that off. So the take is this. Let's go to Ephesians 2, where it's like from verse 11 and following, where it says that God has taken these racial groups, in that case talking Jew and Gentile, and he has taken them from being separate and on opposite sides of a dividing wall. He has torn down the dividing wall between them and made us all one group. So before this starts to sound like hippie kumbaya language, like there's no distinctions among us and the world can live as one and let's all just sing a John Lennon song. You guys know from previous episodes, I don't like John Lennon. I think the dude was a schmo, and I think his worldview was toxic, hot, garbage, and I think Imagine was a terrible piece of music. So we're not going that direction. But there is a... There is an element of unity which we don't want to underemphasize either, right? So we as races, as different races, have unity in Christ, even though it's a good thing to have distinctions among cultures and even races, because different races have different ethnic heritages and things like this. And so it's a good thing to have a heritage and to carry on your ancestors' investment in you. Like, I'll put it this way: you cannot give up your ethnic heritage. Like, you don't have to accept it all as good. A lot of what humans have done in the past is very bad, and we should critique it and reject it and do better in our generation. But to sorry about that. But to reject the heritage that we stand downstream from is to say that we don't need to pass the good elements of that along to our children. You can't do that and honor your father and mother at the same time. Right? So if you're going to honor your father and mother, you have to honor the investment that they made in you. And in the Bible, fathers can refer to all of your forefathers, right? So some of our forefathers were terrible people. We still depend on them for our life. And so, we can critique them. What we can't do is just is flatly dishonor them. And so I say all this to say there is an element where preserving your ethnic heritage is good, and that's just as true for white people as it is for Indians, and it's just as true for white people as it is for Africans of various stripes and the Chinese and the Koreans. I mean, whatever, right? So ethnic heritage is a good thing. It's actually a gift from God, and the problem is you get people specifying this when it comes to, like white heritage or culture, like European heritage, I guess you would say, because you got to be more specific. White is kind of a broad category. It's not like a monolithic thing. But when you get people specifying that, they'll get on social media and say, it's okay to be white, which is a very true statement. But then you get all the neo-Nazis or bots or whoever jumping on and being like, yeah, so let's take this land back and send all the black people back to Africa. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is why we can't have nice things. So when we talk about white supremacy, there's a big difference between appreciating our ethnic heritage, your European heritage. Maybe your ancestors are from, Wales or something, and they've got a really cool immigration story. My wife's grandma was Norwegian and came over here with what is one of the most inspiring stories you're ever going to hear in your life, So these are good things to hang on to, and having a Norwegian heritage is beautiful and is not to be surrendered, right? So it's a good thing to have an ethnic heritage. It is a bad thing to claim ethnic superiority over somebody else. So the part of white supremacy that we object to is not the white, it's the supremacy part, right? You guys get the point. You cannot have a Christian worldview and Christian values and claim superiority over somebody else on the basis of race or anything else, right? Then there's the other issue involved in this, which is the historical revisionism. That's really dark. It's like I said on the last episode, somebody with some racist attitudes doesn't bother me. Like, it's called humanity. Like, people are generally kind of racist, and I think we're uniquely like tender to that in America, because we've been so our history has been so over communicated to us. Maybe not over communicated, but it's been so regularly communicated to us in terms of the slavery that happened here in this country that we see racism as like it's one step shy of murder, like immediately. Like, if you harbor racist attitudes, you could be murdering somebody next week. You go other places in the world and it's like, okay, actually everybody hates everybody that's different than them, and this is kind of a standing human problem. It usually doesn't lead to murder, but it could, and so the gospel is the answer to this thing, and we should probably just apply the gospel. But at the same time, if you got whoever, right? You got crazy Uncle Lenny that's from the Appalachian Mountains, and he says something negative about black people and fatherlessness or something. I mean, this happened to me recently. Some guy makes a comment, and it's like, I mean, okay, like I don't think the guy ought to get the bracelets slapped on him and hauled off to prison just because he's got a backwards idea about how the world works, right? Like, it's bad. Let's engage it on the battlefield of ideas. Fair enough, right? But the thing that I think is really, really dark is when you start changing history to support what what outcome you want, because that's like an argument from authority where you're making up your own authority. So it ends up being an argument from yourself, and that's really twisted because there's no boundaries on that, right? Like when it comes to historical revisionism, if you can get somebody to believe your version of the story, then you can win. And there's no limiting principle on this. It's just limited by the restraint and the good-natured character of whoever's sharing the story, and that's not super dependable when it comes to humanity. So I really don't like what I'm hearing about, Hitler being misunderstood, and look, I'm not even arguing from all the facts of history myself. I got a lot to learn still about history. I'm a history guy. I love me some history. I have a lot to learn. And the more I learn about World War II and the Third Reich and Hitler, the more stuff surprises me. There's a ton of stuff I don't know. But the problem is that the historical narrative that gets crafted in order to support Hitlerian approaches to things, it winds up washing away and whitewashing things that are extremely true, such as he didn't like the Jews. This is not, this is not up for historical debate. And I don't care what kind of context you place something in. When he says Jews are bad, that's an anti-gospel statement. And we can't say, oh, he was misunderstood, or we don't have all the facts, or, you've been lied to by the man, or, whatever. No, listen, if the dude harbored racist attitudes, I don't care what version of history you throw around that. That's something I don't want being passed along to my kids. I want my kids to understand that so that they can reject it, not to explain it away so that they can accept it. It's just the same thing, right? And so anyway, the historical revisionism around this, where people will repackage what happened in Hitler's time, in order to be able to speak some of his words and some of his language, or propagate some of his ideas and say, see, so really it makes a lot of sense. And look, everything makes sense, okay? The craziest stuff in the world that people say, it makes sense to somebody. There's an internal logic to absolutely everything. And just because you can make something make sense, you can make it seem a little bit less nonsensical, a little bit less delusional. That doesn't mean it's correct, right? Coherent and correct are two very different things. And it's a really interesting exercise in history, actually, to go back to read about the losers of wars, or the people who were the oppressors rather than the stories of the oppressed and the plight of the oppressed, right? Like, go and figure out how it is that so many soldiers end up being SS officers, end up being in concentration camps and killing people. Like, it made sense to them at the time. That doesn't mean they were right. They weren't. But I could repackage history to say, see, so from their perspective, it really did make sense. And you know what? That might be right. That still doesn't make it defensible. And so all this Hitler worship based on historical revisionism, it's going to fall flat on its face under a little bit of scrutiny. The trick is, we don't give it a lot of scrutiny. So yeah, it should find no safe hiding place in the church. And I don't mean that the church should shut down the discussion of it. What I mean is the church should embrace and then lead the discussion of it, because we've got God's word on the situation. We have Ephesians 2, and that leaves room for neither white supremacy nor anti-Semitism, which seem to be a package deal, historically, or Jew worship. It leaves no room for worshiping the Jews and thinking they can do no wrong, or for, worshiping Israelis, Middle Easterners and thinking they can do no wrong, or for hating them. I mean, whatever. Like, all superiority claims based on race or anything else are completely washed away by the gospel, because the gospel maintains distinctions between people groups while equalizing the value of people and of those groups. And every culture is wrong in some ways. And so you got to throw it through the lens of Scripture, receive what is good and reject what is evil, and just go through that evaluation process. And you got to do it every generation, right? So yeah, apparently I was wrong. There is a resurgence of Hitler worship or white supremacy online, specifically with young men and specifically with people identifying as Christians, although they've got a really screwy definition of that word, because Western doesn't mean Christian, European heritage does not mean Christian, Christendom is not Christianity, and the church ought to be articulating these things better than anybody else. So if you're a white nationalist or a white supremacist, then hey, come on the show, man, because we're going to talk gospel, and you might be very articulate in your viewpoints, but when we stack it up against the gospel, we're going to see that Jesus is actually far better than whatever worldview you're propagating, whatever solution you're bringing to bear on the problems in today's world. So No. All right, let's see. What do we got next? We've got, yeah, I've noticed this one too. Okay, this is not worded in a kind way, but the question basically, if I'm, kind of softening the blow a little bit, would be, why is it that, and this is an honest question. I would love to get an answer to this. Why is it that Mormon missionaries seem to be a little bit timid about their language? All right, or their message. I mean, in the language that they use, there's a certain type of timidity among that. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, and I hear them, right? So this happened to me actually just a couple of weeks ago. I was at the ball fields, and I see a couple of Mormon missionaries, right? Now, we're in an area with a lot of Mormons, and so, I see them show up, and I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to them, see if we can share the gospel. And so I'm coming back from the concession stand. I got my, Gatorade or whatever it was, and I stopped and talked to him. I said, hey guys, you taking a break from the work? You got family playing or what? And they had to get up. They had the white shirts on, and they had the name tags that said elder whoever. And so they were obviously on their mission, door knocking. And so I said, you got family playing or what? They said, oh yeah, we got some friends here and so on. And so I was like, all right, cool. Well, I'll leave you to that. I don't want to interrupt family time, but I said, if you guys want to talk about Jesus, I would love to run some of my questions past you about what you believe, because I'd like to hear it from you guys. And so anyway, I'll be right over there. I'd love to come and talk if you want to talk about Jesus. And they said, all right, cool, thanks. And so I'm over there and I'm just standing there, just waiting, and they're talking to their friends. They got people coming up to them and saying hi and whatever, and they're having their social time. And that's great, all for it. And then they're kind of looking over at me and like hoping I'm not looking also. And I was wearing sunglasses, so they couldn't quite tell if I was looking at them or not. And I'm thinking, those guys are about to ghost me. That's what's about to happen. And so sure enough, they walk past me when they're leaving, pretending not to see me, and they just keep going. And I'm like, why? Like, why? And so I was going to catch up with them and stuff, but then, my kid fell down and got hurt, didn't work out. So, the Lord had me not speaking to them that day. Okay, fair enough. But my question at the time was the same as this question. It's like, what? Like, I just straight up asked you guys, can you please share your gospel with me? And you're on a mission. Like, these 2 years of your lives are dedicated to spreading your message, and I just teed it up for you. Like, why would you not? And so I was actually ranting to somebody on Sunday morning about this, and I was like, I don't understand a missionary like passing up an opportunity to share his message. I'm a missionary. Why would you pass that up? And somebody said to me, well, Dustin, you can be kind of intimidating. And I'm like, so? Like, first off, I made every effort to be nice. And you guys, my lovely, loyal listeners, I would make every effort to be nice. I really would. But I just don't understand it. Like, if something's a little bit intimidating, you're on a mission trip. If you're an ambassador for the King of the universe, you don't not do your job because you're afraid that somebody's voice might be louder than you're comfortable with. Like, are we serious? Are we reading the same New Testament here? So I just don't get it. Anyway, that's not the first time that's happened. I've talked to missionaries before because, I had a sneaking suspicion that they were skipping my house because they knew, that I was a pastor. And it's like, listen, guys, if you cared about souls, I told a couple of them this, poor kids. I probably was a little overbearing on this one. This was when I'd been a pastor for like 6 weeks. I was like, you're not coming to my house because I'm a pastor. And if you actually cared about people's souls, I would be the first house that you would come to because I have influence over what people believe in this little community here. So do you care about your message or not? Like, let's go, let's talk. And so, they sat down and we talked gospel. But, I don't understand. And I guess I'm kind of owning this question for myself. I'm empathizing with the person who asked me this. It was on a Sunday morning or Sunday night, I guess. And I don't know, man. I don't understand why it is that there seems to be a pattern of not being super confident in your message. Like, even when they come to the door and they talk to you, and this is all observational. If you're a Mormon missionary, I don't know why you would be listening to this if you're a Mormon missionary, but whatever. If somebody's LDS and you got an answer to this is an honest question, but it's frustrating for me because, when they come to the door, then it's like there's a lot of stuttering and stuff. And it's like, do you know about our message and what we teach? And, are you familiar with Jesus? And I feel like saying, bro, just say it, man. Like, if you believe something, say it. It's 1 Corinthians 4:13. We believed and therefore we spoke. Like, come on, man. I'm almost rooting for him at a certain point because it's so painful sometimes to listen to. And look, I understand the jitters. I totally do. Some people might think that I never get the jitters when I share the gospel with people. I do. And it's normal. It's regular. It's like, I understand that nervousness, and it's not foreign. It's not even a distant memory to me. This happens sometimes where I'm like, I'm going to share the gospel with this person, but where do I start? How do I listen to them without doing that thing where I'm just looking for my chance to jump in, but also, with integrity and upfront, without tricking them, still steer this conversation towards the most important matters in their life. Like, how do you do this? And so, yeah, I understand the butterflies and all of that, but it's like, dude, this is your job. This is your mission. Like, so I don't understand why it is that missionaries of any religion would not just adopt the Acts 17 approach with Paul, right? He gets on top of Mars Hill at the Areopagus and he just lays it out. And even the stuff that was going to be embarrassing, like even the stuff that was going to be a stumbling block, that was going to be hard for them to understand, like the resurrection, he's like, here's the resurrection. They're like, we're not sure we agree with that, but the rest of this we're okay with. He's like, no, we don't get off of the resurrection. Listen, guys, here it is. And it was a loving and a compassionate presentation, but it was clear. He's like, here's who you guys are worshiping. Let me introduce you to the real God here. And he was showing them so much love, but with so much clarity and also boldness. And boldness and being a jerk are not the same thing. And so it's like, I don't know if it's because, as I've described it before, Mormonism kind of has a gospel of niceness. Like the highest ethic in Mormon practice seems to be, just being nice, being a kind person. And so because of that, you don't want to be too pushy. I know they've also got a doctrine that says the Spirit of God does not reside in argumentation, so they don't want to be argumentative. And, while I disagree with that from a New Testament perspective, I also understand where they're coming from. Like, I understand their position, right, about not arguing. But I don't understand the timidity. And I'm sure it's not all of them, but why is there a pattern of being nervous? Or I don't want to say scared, because I'm not trying to mock people, like a playground thing, like, come on, you fraidy cat, share your gospel with me. Like, I'm not doing that thing. Like I said, I understand what it's like to be in that position. And I understand what it's like to completely botch a gospel presentation. I got stories, man, and they're humiliating stories, and I've got them. And I'll acquire more, right? I'm not done getting them. I'm just saying there's a pattern here. You got multiple points on a plot line. You can draw a straight line, and I don't know why those points form that line. So if anybody knows somebody that could talk to me about this or help me out or educate me on this, I'd like to know. All right. Last question for today. Can you explain how Satan's influence works? If he isn't omnipotent, meaning not all powerful, if he isn't omniscient, doesn't know everything, if he isn't omnipresent, he's not everywhere, how does that work? And how are his missions, how are his minions employed to mess with us? Or are they? Yeah, really good question. We don't know how many demons there are. Okay, so yeah, this is correct. Satan doesn't know everything. Obviously, if he had known what was going to be accomplished in the gospel, he would not have crucified the Lord of glory. It's not that he shouldn't have known. He had the whole Hebrew Bible where it was all predicted, and Jesus predicted it himself many times, but sin makes you stupid, and he was spiritually blinded. Surprise, surprise. So he doesn't know everything, and he's not all powerful. He's very limited. He's on a divine leash, and he's not omnipresent. He can't be anywhere. He can be banished from places. He can be, and demons are, at least some demons are regionally assigned. One demon will be the Prince of Persia in Daniel 10. Another one will be the, another demon will be the King of Tyre, for example, a demon-possessed human ruler. But Ezekiel 28 and I think 29 also refers to this demon as the King of Tyre. So it would appear that a demon was controlling the ruler of a nation. So it seems that some demons at least are regionally assigned to national and political powers. But yeah, the other demons, I mean, the ones that are just like possessing people and, bothering you when you sleep, that sort of thing, giving you nightmares and bad thoughts and whatever. I don't know how many of them there are. I don't know exactly how it works. So let me lay out some generalities, because there's a reason it's called the unseen realm. We can't see it. So there's a lot we don't know. What we do know is this. It's generally the way that they work is by invitation and deception. So when we do things in life that demons tend to also do, it's like we're getting in a car that we know they're already in, or maybe we don't know it, right? But the music that we listen to, a lot of times there's demonic influence through music. And so if we engage with that music, we can open ourselves up to demonic influence. It doesn't mean you will. It doesn't mean that we can predict what they're going to do with that. It just means you're opening a door to a place where demons hang out, and so you can't really be too surprised at whatever happens next. The movies that we watch, the pornography industry engaging in that is an open door to demons. Also, certain things that are based on demonic principles. I don't know about this one actually for sure, but I've heard that Dungeons and Dragons has a lot of like demonic influence in it or something like that. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, so I'm not sure. But like, let's say that that's true for a second. If that's the case, if you're giving up control for the sake of a role-playing game or something like that to something that has demonic patterns or incantations or witchcraft or whatever, then yeah, like don't be surprised when demons take a little more control than you give them. That's essentially what demon possession is. There's this idea that demon possession is like a light switch, like somebody's not possessed, and then they're walking along just minding their own business, and since they're not saved, and just like, and then all of a sudden their eyes go green and they're demon possessed. It's not like that. There was a movie that came out a few years ago. Really interesting movie. I didn't want to go see it. Moment of confession, Dad. So my dad was like, "Hey, we're gonna go see this movie, Nefarious," and I was like, "All right, yeah, we can go see it." And I was like, "What's it about?" And he's like, "Oh, it's about a demon possessed guy on death row." And I'm like, "Man, I don't know, Dad. Like the idea of just watching a demon possessed dude in a cell, like." I'm a pastor, man. I deal with enough of that stuff at work. Like, is this supposed to be entertaining to me? But he said to me, no, it's like the Screw Tape Letters from C.S. Lewis, except it's in cinema. And he says it's supposed to be getting really good reviews. And I'm like, I'm not sure. He goes, well, I already bought the ticket. I was like, okay, I'll be there. So we go and we watch this movie, Nefarious, and it's about just that. This guy is about to be executed, and then he's getting evaluated by a shrink so that he can, I guess, like, to see if he's mentally competent to die. I don't know. Our justice system is weird. Anyhow, in that interview, the shrink is an atheist, and the demon that is inside of this prisoner on death row winds up doing most of the talking. And he just explains the whole methodology. And I got to tell you, it was pretty biblically solid. There were a couple of things in there that I was like, okay, that's not my personal take on it. Like I've got a different theological position on that little issue, but it was so secondary. It's like not a huge deal, right? But it was really solid. And one of the ways that the demon in that movie explained possession was he said, well, first this person, the guy that he was possessing, first he started doing this, and that gave us a little invitation, and we jumped in. And then he started doing this, and that gave us a little more. And then we were, and then we started tempting him to do it, and we were taking control, and he didn't know it because he kept giving us more. And before you know it, he had forked everything over to us. So we just said, all right, why are we pretending he's still in charge? I'll just grab the wheel and call this thing what it is. And then he went on a mass murder spree, and whatever. And so it is very much like a less like a switch and more like a dial, where it's like a little bit of you give over a little bit of control by giving into demonic temptations or fleshly temptations, and you give over a little more control. So demon possession is a dial, and demonic influence is a dial, but it's your hand on the dial, and you have to choose whether to turn that thing or not. So we've got a lot of agency here. If you look at Luke, I think it's Luke 22:42, if I remember right, where it says that that Judas, you know what? Let me see here. It is 22:42 is something different. Let me see. Bear with me. I think it's like right at the beginning of Luke 22. Yeah, right there. Luke 22:3. And Satan entered into Judas, who was called Iscariot, belonging to the number of the 12. So there was a moment, this can look like a light switch, right? There was a moment where Satan was not in Judas, and then he was, right? There was a demon possession. But if you keep up with the story leading up to that, Judas had been robbing the treasury already. So he had been sinning against the Lord. He had been engaged in theft and lies and deception, and it's all been growing in secret. And he's got, kind of this secret life that nobody knew about, apparently, and yet the demons saw this, and he was just giving control over to him until it was total. So yeah, the way that demons influence or work or whatever, I don't know about the numbers in which they work. I don't know if everybody's got a demon assigned to them, or if they've got to spread their forces a little more strategically because their numbers aren't huge. I don't know. I know that there's myriads upon myriads of angels, right? Like there's a group of angels that nobody can count in Revelation, and apparently a third of them at some point got swept away to be demons. So I would assume that there's a lot of demons, probably plenty to cover the world. But yeah, how does possession work? I mean, actually, if you've ever seen a demon-possessed person, you'll notice patterns when you see these people, and it's that they are always engaged in demonic activity as a matter of lifestyle. Not always as a member of a cult, although if they're a member of a false religion, then 1 Corinthians 10 says they're working with demons anyway. Anytime they sacrifice to their gods or they do their religious activity, they're interacting with demons. And so Paul's like, don't do that. I don't want you to do that. So they might be wrapped up in a false religion, or they might just be involved in drugs and giving over control of their psyche over and over and over again by getting high or getting drunk or whatever. And so when we're not sober-minded, when we're not self-controlled, then we're controlled by whatever else, right? And that's just an on-ramp for demons. And so anytime somebody is demon-possessed, you can look in their lives. Sometimes it's pretty well hidden, but you can see in their lives what those on-ramps are. They always exist. So yeah, demon possession is not... The demon-possessed person, once they've been healed and delivered, they do deserve compassion because they've been through a certain form of hell, right? Like, that's terrible. They need to be evangelized. But also, let's understand, we do have a role to play in protecting ourselves from demons, right? We've got a war to fight, and fighting temptation is part of that war because those are the on-ramps for these things. So, all right, guys, any more questions, text them into 509-867-0070, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Hungry for Wisdom is a ministry of Grace and Truth Community in West Richland, Washington. 1 John 4:19. We love him because he first loved us. If you are enjoying Hungry for Wisdom, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share it. Leave us a 5-star rating if you think we've earned it.